Great. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today for How I Went and Found Careers Beyond the Bench. This is our first time hosting this event, and it's always great to be able to talk about different career pathways that are available to you and how alumni have navigated it post-graduation. Before we officially begin, I wish to acknowledge the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. And today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. I will be sending out additional resources and learning materials and readings for folks after today's session for you to learn more about the territories and treaties that you are on, knowing that we are maybe calling from different spaces in this moment. And so I will be sending a long list because I do think the best place to begin when it comes to conversations is through a place of learning and conversation, and hope to bring that spirit of learning and conversation here in today's session. And so without further ado, I am going to pass it off to Anshi, who will be moderating our session today.
Awesome. Thank you, Joanne. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Careers Beyond the Bench panel. I hope you're all equally excited as I am for the wide range of interesting panel members and for an insightful conversation. Just a quick housekeeping items we'll run through really quickly. We'll start this event by having the panel members briefly introducing themselves. Quick, just your name, what your role is currently, and briefly what you studied during your undergrad or your graduate studies, sorry. And then we'll start with some questions for the panel. While I am asking the questions and the panel members are answering, you are welcome and invited to put in your questions that you may have in the chat box. I will field them based on how time goes and how the conversation flows, but I also do encourage you to hold on to the questions because we will have a networking session at the end, and that will allow you to talk to the panel members of interest directly yourself. We are aiming for everyone to get a chance to visit two of the panel members. So keep a note of that as well as they're answering your questions, and maybe there's something you want to follow up on. That would be a good indicator of which breakout room you can go into. So without taking up too much time, I will have Darren kick off the introductions, please. So just your name, a role, and briefly what you studied.
Great. Thanks for having me. So my name is Darren Rodenheiser, currently the Director of Customer Empowerment at Lumerate. And Lumerate is a Toronto-based bootstrapped startup, and we do data intelligence for the biotech and pharma industry. And then my studies in graduate school, so I worked under Alison McGuigan in chemical engineering. And I focused on developing 3D models of cancer using tissue engineering approaches.
Amazing. Thank you. Geetanjali, can I have you go second?
For sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Gitanjali. I currently work as Manager of Postdoctoral Affairs and Programming Development at the University of Waterloo. So I manage programs that support grad students, postdocs, and research in their academic and professional journeys. And I did a master's in material science and engineering at U of T, and then moved to the University of Waterloo to pursue another master's and PhD in mechanical and mechatronics engineering in the field of 3D printing for biomedical purposes. So happy to be here.
That's awesome. Thank you. Hannah, can I have you go next?
Hi everyone, my name is Hannah. I currently work as a scientific communication specialist at the Princess Margaret Cancer Foundation, which raises money for Princess Margaret Cancer Center here in Toronto. I did my PhD at U of T, but in the Department of Laboratory Medicine and Pathobiology, so it belongs to the Faculty of Medicine. And my work was mainly in vivo mouse models related to hematology and immunology.
Perfect. Thank you. And last but not the least, Tyler, can I have you go next?
Yeah, thanks, Anchi. Hi, everyone. My name is Tyler Samir. I am a supervisor and senior medical writer at Everest Clinical Research. So we get hired out by pharma companies, biotech companies when they're conducting their clinical trials, and we can help them out with various aspects of the trial. So being in medical writing will help prepare, regulatory documents and that sort of thing for them that they'll ultimately submit to FDA, Health Canada, and that sort of thing. I did my master's and PhD at the Rehabilitation Sciences Institute, which is within the Faculty of Medicine, where I studied the relationship between muscle strength and balance control following a stroke and the different biomechanical aspects of that. So happy to be here today.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So the first question, and I'll have Darren and Tyler perhaps tackle this one first. What are some ways that the students that have joined the session can focus on making the most of their graduate studies? Maybe something that either you did or looking back, you kind of wished you had done.
Sure. Tyler, I'm happy to start. So I think probably a good strategy here is to start thinking about what you want to do after you graduate. I know that's a massive question and it's a really tough one. And oftentimes when I have sort of career chats with students that are getting close to graduating, they're really worried and struggling with this one. Um, but I think it's an important one to figure out. But you don't have to get the right answer the first time. So just start trying to think about what you actually might want to try after you graduate and start to build your network in that direction. So maybe you want to go into like a startup that's been spun out of the university. So start trying to build your network into the startup culture at U of T, or maybe you think you might want to do management consulting, so start trying to build your network in that direction. And I think a good strategy is to identify groups or clubs that are at U of T that are built around these career paths. Get involved. You can build your network, learn about the roles that you might be doing, and you can start making an assessment of whether or not it might be a good fit for you. So really just realize that once you do graduate, finding your next role, the bigger and better your network is, the easier that aspect's going to be. So I'd really focus on thinking about ways you can start to build your network now while you're kind of in a safe space at the university. Maybe I'll pause and let Tyler add some color to that.
Oh, that's great, Darren. I'll take like a little bit of a step back, I think, from what you mentioned about reaching out to groups and things like that. I think, that question that we always get of what do you want to be when you grow up is still on our minds and often still changing and that sort of thing. And I think throughout your grad studies, one of the ways to kind of assess what those things are is what do you enjoy doing on your day to day, right? Like take that step back and say, what are these soft skills that I've been working on? What have I been developing, and which ones do I actually want to continue to use and to apply, right? And I think that can help you, at least gauge a few areas of interest in terms of where you might want to see your career go. I know that was something that I definitely did, and I kind of binned myself into more of the writing world. Project management and data analytics were kind of three things that I found interests in, and kind of you know geared my cover letters and resumes to those sorts of areas and started, like Darren mentioned, building my network from there and kind of fostering some of those connections. So that's another way I think to kind of bring that all together to really kind of help you have a good sort of foundation for when you're starting to wrap up on what your next steps will end up being.
Great, yeah. Sorry to put you guys both on the spot, but if there was there any specific programs that you guys had done during your graduate studies that maybe this is like a time to give a plug or a shout out to those that may have helped you or looking back, may have heard of maybe that you could advise students to look after?
So I would say that I didn't really take advantage of specific programs, but I know that there is a. When I was thinking about graduating, I was thinking of the management consulting career path. I didn't end up going that way, but there is a really good group at U of T for those of you that may want to consider that. So I would highly recommend getting involved with that, and it will actually lead to introductions when you're looking to get your first role in that path. I took a startup route, so I thought of myself as being very entrepreneurial, and I always wanted to build a startup. So I was very involved in that space, which did work out well because my first role out of the university was to try and build a startup. So I did that for about a year. And when you try and do a startup out of U of T, there's a lot of groups and programs and incubators available where you can go to try and commercialize typically your research. That's usually the easiest way to get started with a startup out of grad school, is to take your research, try and commercialize it. And there's a lot of funding and support groups and incubators available for that. So that was the path that I took. So I don't know if anyone here is thinking about maybe doing a startup based on the research, but I can tell you that that's not a bad idea. You're going to build your network um, very well if you take that approach. And even if the startup doesn't work out, it will definitely lead to more job opportunities, either within U of T's startup network, and there's lots of successful startups out there. And if not, every single job application will or interviewer will be happy to hear that you're entrepreneurial. And if you can give some examples of how you've been entrepreneurial, that'll go a long way into landing your first role.
I can just touch on, I think, these types of events were something that I tried to attend. The life sciences career development was another one that hosted various, career seminars and that sort of thing, just to kind of get you a little bit more exposure to, what are these other jobs out here, that isn't working at the bench, not in academia and that sort of thing. So I think keeping your eyes posted for these types of events is kind of that first step as well, just to figure out what's out there to decide how you want to develop your career from there.
That's perfect. Thank you guys. And I guess another more specific question, but if you're looking at people that are coming into your organizations, perhaps like new hires or new graduates that are entering, have you noticed anything that's specific, like a common pattern or something that they've done or a trend that they've done during their graduate studies that you feel have helped them succeed or yourself succeed in the roles that you're in?
I think it's important to have experience in some way or another when you're applying for a role. So, for example, our Lumerate leverages artificial intelligence in our data science and in our intelligence capabilities. So, if you think you may want to go work at an AI type company and you don't currently get a lot of exposure to AI in your in your grad studies, then maybe you want to start doing some activities that allow you to build out some skill in that area, or at least some exposure to that area that you can talk about in your interviews. That's one example. I think something that everyone can do, independent of the experience or the nature of the job, is to take a coffee chat approach. I really don't think that you should ever have to submit a resume cold to a job application. I think you should always try and network your way into a job opportunity. And the best way to do that is if you see that there's an open role at a company, or if you just think you might want to work at a company, take advantage of the fact that you're a student and you're trying to learn about your next steps, and have coffee chats with people that work at the place you may want to land or in the field that you might want to land at. It's a great way to build your network and to show that you're interested and outgoing, and that you can take initiative to try and get understanding and to make inroads into a particular area. So utilizing the coffee chat approach is definitely something important to do.
Yeah, I think if there's anything to take home, it's what Darren just said with that. I think that is always what I try and really harp on people that I usually end up chatting with them. So, I mean, I'm like, this is exactly what you should be doing. Keep doing this sort of thing. But I think having those coffee chats, those informational interviews, you just gain a lot of understanding about the role, the company culture, right? Like you shouldn't have to go in knowing whether you have an interest in the job, and your time is valuable too, right? It's more valuable for you to spend half hour talking to someone to be like, maybe this role isn't something I'm interested in, and not apply to it, versus I'm going to gear all these cover letters and resumes to these different jobs that I've seen because I think maybe they interest me. So you're going to gain a lot more insight, but also I think your time will be a lot better spent from that perspective. One other thing I think, just in terms of like what you can make sure you have on your resume and that sort of thing, super quick, just related to like medical writing. Don't get hung up on just your publications, because that's what academia tells us to do. In your day to day, you do a lot of different types of writing, probably editing other like lab members' work, that sort of thing. Like quantify that to be able to be like, I have, edited X number of grant reviews or whatever. Like you can put things like that together in terms of spinning some of your soft skills in another way. So always kind of have that approach, I think, regardless of what the job is take that step back, see how you were able to demonstrate these soft skills and find a way to quantify that and really apply it to the different positions that you're interested in.
That was amazing. Thank you guys. I put some hard questions on that, but I appreciate the insightful feedback. Hannah and Gitanjali, I'll pivot towards you guys now. I think one of the biggest questions that students like myself are constantly faced with is, should you stay in academia? Should you do industry? But even within industry, it's such a big field. There's so many different types of works and role out there. What were some of the ways that you kind of deciding factors that went into deciding which bench work to pursue and which non-bench work, sorry, to pursue, and how did you kind of come up with that?
I can start. I realized very quickly throughout my PhD that this life was not for me. The underpaid overwork side of things is not something that I wanted to continue doing. There's being passionate for something, and then there's being passionate enough to do this for years and years. That wasn't me. But I also realized that I really liked the communication side and the writing side. So throughout my PhD, I was the classroom and communication side coordinator for Let's Talk Science, which is a nonprofit organization that does science outreach for kindergarten all the way to grade 12. So that was kind of my first exposure to not just science communication, but also nonprofit. I think when we talk about, I don't want to stay in academia, the only options people think is industry. Nonprofit is actually another option that you can take. So the reason why we get hired is we want to put something in front of a donor that wants them to give money, and we're talking about a lot of money here. So I work with the major gifts team at the foundation, so they do any kind of proposals and gifts that go from like 100,000 on the really, really low end to like multiple $1 million proposals. So we want to put something together that is very impactful and reflects what the donors are interested in, but we can't put them in front of the clinician most of the time because most clinicians and researchers have not been taught how to talk to normal people and explain to them what they do and why what they do is so important and why they should support it. So this is where we come in as science writers or science communicators. We bridge these two things because we're trained scientists. We've gone through the academic route, but we're also communications experts. We can take what clinicians and researchers send us or tell us in interviews, and then we translate it into something lay that will reflect still the science, is true to the science, but in a way that is appealing to someone who does not have a science background. And especially for my role right now, because we talk about cancer, this is a very personal topic to a lot of people. A lot of donors give because they've had loved ones who passed away, who've loved ones who are affected by cancer, or they themselves are. So there's a very personal connection a lot of the time. So we also want to be careful about how we frame certain topics and how we talk about them that we usually wouldn't think about when we write something for an academic journal or giving a presentation to medical professionals. And that kind of, I wanted that impact. I wanted to use my training in a way that I would have a more immediate impact. And that's why science writing, science communication really appealed to me. Plus, the hours are way better.
So for me, I think when I first started my research-based master's degree, I thought I'd stay on the academic path of, doing a PhD, a postdoc, and a faculty position. But over time, like Hannah mentioned, I also realized that life was not for me. As I went along my degrees, I realized that I did enjoy bench work, but not necessarily only bench work. It was the process of mentoring students, developing programs, seeing the broader impact of your research beyond a single project, a single research paper. And so that realization set me on a path to explore what else is out there. And, just not just industry, but apart from that, what are some other non-bench career options? So earlier Darren and Tyler mentioned arrange coffee chats with people who are in non-bench careers, go to panels like these and explore what else are people doing outside. So that's what I did. And as I explored other career options, I considered roles in educational development, research administration, online learning, student success, and I saw myself being drawn to positions where I could support students, enhance their learning experiences, and help develop academic programs. So, by recognizing some of my strengths and interests, I found a career that still kept me connected to academia while allowing me to make meaningful impact beyond the bench. And even though I moved away from hands-on research, I still use many of the skills I developed in the lab, like many of my colleagues here, everyday skills like project and time management, critical thinking, problem solving, communication, and knowledge mobilization, data analysis, reporting, and collaboration and adaptability. So these transferable skills made it easier for me to transition into roles where I today support students, postdocs, and faculty through education. And so I would say if anybody's considering a move beyond the bench, think about what excites you most about your work. Is it strategic planning? Is it communicating research? Is it mentoring? There are so many career paths out there where all of these skills are valued. And, you don't necessarily have to leave academia behind. You can find roles that still connect you to research in a different way. At least that's what worked for me.
Thank you both. I guess that was very comprehensive. And I think that segues really nicely into the next question, which I think all four of you have mentioned at one point or another, is that transition from academia into industry and making it translatable, but also just setting yourself up for success. So for all of you, kind of opening it up, what does the transition look like from a bench experience or an academic setting to a non-bench? And for, I guess, maybe starting point would be, how do you emphasize your experience or your skill set to be compatible with an industry? Hannah, can I get you to start off with this one?
Sure. Because I knew I was gonna look for communications roles and those kind of things, I was specifically also looking at ones where we're not just doing necessarily medical communications, but also lay communications. So it was really highlighting experiences that I've had from doing that kind of thing. So a lot of people know about 3MT. It's a great opportunity to not just learn about your research and actually gets you thinking about your research in a different way, but also practice those skills. I don't know if this program still exists, but there used to be an equivalent to 3MT at U of T that was specifically for students whose first language isn't English. It's University of Toronto's Most Understandable Scientist program. Same concept, presentation slide, you get 5 minutes to present your whole thing. So I won this program in 2021. So that was something that I really highlighted on my CV, as well as, like I said, because I was going into nonprofit too, the fact that I had experience with nonprofit, working in the science communication space already, as well as volunteering. That before I even started working for Let's Talk Science, I also just volunteered with them and did some of the classroom outreach activities that they do. So those kind of things combined then with, I have academic experience writing publications, presenting is a big one. You go to all these conferences, you're helping lab members with things. Maybe you're the person that everyone goes to in the lab, that when they're writing a grant or a publication, that they're like, can you please proofread this for me? Those kind of things. And then your typical PhD skills, time management, you're managing to figure something out that no one has ever figured out before. You're really trained to think in a way that not a lot of other professions kind of train you, like a PhD does. So really highlighting those skills. I mean, if you're able to figure out a problem that no one has ever kind of addressed before, you can figure out basically anything else. It's not like, if you can do a PhD, you can do the industry work too.
Great, thank you. Darren, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I can just build on what Hannah said, but and also trying to remember back to when I was making my transition out of bench work. I think what a lot of students tend to do is look at the actual experimental type skills that they have, because they play such a big role in your day to day. You're doing microscopy, you're doing imaging, maybe you're doing chemical reactions, running PCR, whatever it is. I think you tend to think of those things as the aspects of your life that you have to try and translate into your next role. But that, in many ways, kind of pigeonholes you into another bench role, right? And so, Hannah did a great job of talking about a lot of the other skills and aspects that you have and that you've developed as a PhD student or as a graduate student. And I think you need to spend some time thinking about what those are, and you'll start to realize that you actually have this whole huge skill set beyond running experiments that is what you're going to rely on when you get out into industry. So, problem solving. Hannah, you've already done a good job mentioning a lot of these, but you're a really good problem solver. You know how to go and find information. These are skills that are not as common as you might believe because you've been exposed and you're in an ecosystem where a lot of people are really good at this, but when you get out into the world, it's not as common as you might expect. So really spend some time thinking about what your other skills are beyond the experimental side. And then the other thing that I would add, which I think is important to do and to start thinking about now, is there is an aspect of having a personal brand that will carry you when you get into industry. One example of that might be, a LinkedIn profile, right? I see some people who do not utilize LinkedIn at all, and I see others that utilize it very heavily. And I would put myself more to the, utilize it quite a bit side of things. And when you map that onto how we hire at Lumerate, we're always checking out potential candidates on LinkedIn to see, what they look like in terms of their brand, right? Like, are they posting? Are they like active? Maybe especially if you're thinking about sales type roles, which is a great place for, uh, you know, PhD or graduate students to pursue because there's this whole world of technical sales where you need to sell scientific things and you need to be able to speak to the scientists and also speak to the business side of thing, which is part of communication. All graduate students are great at communication because you have to give presentations and all that stuff. So start thinking about your personal brand and thinking about how you can kind of set yourself up for success when you do go start applying for roles.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Geetanjali, can I pivot back to you if you want to add on anything?
Yeah, so I'll say when I first considered transitioning from bench to non-bench career, I focused on understanding how my academic experience could be applied outside the lab. So very much what Hannah and Darren were talking about, identify the transferable skills. You all have them. Just identifying and naming them, really important. Networking and exploring different roles. We talked about that a little bit earlier already. Getting experience in non-bench roles. So like Hannah was mentioning, volunteering is something that she did similar things, while you're doing your degree, try and get experience, working part-time, maybe, again, finding those volunteer roles. And then, similar to what Darren was saying about LinkedIn. So a lot of it would be to adapt your resume and language. When we are doing a master's or PhD, everything is the academic CV or, teaching dossier if you're looking for those roles. But when you're looking for non-bench careers, very important to make sure you have a resume, which is so hard to do when you're a PhD student having a one-page resume. You have so much under your belt, you can't condense all of that in one page or put everything on LinkedIn. But like Darren mentioned, a lot of these non-bench career roles, hiring managers are always looking at your LinkedIn profile or asking you for a one-pager to condense everything in there. So yeah, those would be some of my suggestions.
Great, thank you. And Tyler, sorry, I know it's hard going last because everyone had such great answers, but any
It's fantastic. I think everyone touched on a lot of the items I'd talk about. I think I'm gonna drop what Darren said earlier again. The best way to understand how to translate experience from academia to industry is have a coffee chat with someone who can directly be like, I know you've done this in your role as a grad student. Make sure that that pops in your resume. Like, that people are very open to tell you that, like, these are the skills that we're looking for that we know you have, and we know that they don't get highlighted enough on resumes. And it's a very difficult skill, I think, to be able to like reflect on all those things that you've done and be like, what were those soft skills that I developed? You can always ask ChatGPT too. Be like, I have done all of these different tasks throughout my PhD. What are some of the soft skills that I've developed doing that? And find ones that resonate with you or resonate with the job that you're applying to, right? Like there are tools out there that can just help us do some of that reflection as well sometimes. So that never hurts either.
Yeah, ChatGPT is very fitting for this day and age. That's a great tool. I guess more going in a bit more focus, if as much as you're aware of, but I think it would be helpful for the members that are attending today to understand what the hiring and the recruitment practice looks like at each of your organizations, especially because it's very different than a grad school application or something that people have probably encountered before. And I assume it varies quite drastically between each organization. We can go backwards this time. So Tyler, if you want to go first.
Sure, no, I'm happy to. So for us, you submit a resume cover letter. Ideally, I think most people at most organizations would agree if they have the posting on their actual website, it's I think typically preferable to submit through the website versus like the LinkedIn or the quick applies and that sort of thing. So try and get to the source if you can, depending on how the HR is structured and where they typically will review applications first. I think that that's a good starting point. Um, then in terms of our recruitment and hiring process, compared to others that I've done, we are a little bit more brief. We have a lot of focus on the front end. So our CEO still honestly reviews the resumes that get passed forward to her from HR as kind of the like big screening. And then from there, we'll usually have a short list of applicants that we will send like a screening questionnaire to, just to learn a little bit more about their background, any past experience they've had in clinical trials, medical writing, what their understanding of the clinical trial process is. And then from there, we have a panel interview with HR as well as the director of the department, and usually who their potential direct report would be. So whether it's a supervisor or a manager as well. And that's usually about an hour and a half or so. And then immediately following that, we do a medical writing assignment. So we have, I think, 3 or 4 questions that we'll send you. One might be like, here's a journal article, write an abstract on it based on the content. It could be, here's a table, summarize what the key results are, that sort of thing, just to gauge your understanding and critical thinking and analysis and that sort of thing. And then from there, they make a decision. So we're a little bit briefer. I've interviewed at other companies where there'll be 3 separate interviews that you'll go through and that sort of thing. So we're a little bit front heavy in terms of what happens behind the scenes and how we move forward with our candidates. But that's kind of the approach that we take at Everest anyways.
Amazing. Thank you. Gitanjali, if you want to.
Yeah, so I work at the University of Waterloo, and I'm assuming that, most universities have a pretty similar process. So really very similar to what Tyler said, you first go ahead and then there's a portal, you submit your resume, cover letter in terms of how many pages or number of words that you can type in. It's very strict. And so, it'd be a 1 or 2 page limitation that you'd have when you submit all of this. One of the big things is they will ask you if you know someone or somebody recommended this role to you. So, it would be great if you did have people that you had talked to before you submitted your application so that you could potentially put their names in so that they could also serve as maybe a reference for you to some extent. And after you've submitted, the hiring manager for that role will look at all of the resumes and then invite you to an interview. A lot of times what I've seen is they would ask you to prepare something, let's say a short presentation or even a document, and then send it to the interview committee ahead of time. And then, they would ask you questions on what you've prepared on your document or presentation, whatever they decide to choose. in the interview. But a lot of times, for myself, just because I transitioned from a bench to a non-bench career, I saw them asking me questions like, how would you translate your experience, let's say project management experience, into this role? Because you've been primarily involved in bench research, right? So they focused really on project management, communication, problem solving, and there'd be a lot of case study kind of questions that we'd go through. And then if you do move on to the next step, then you'd probably have an interview with HR strictly. And yeah, depending on, how big the team is, there might be 2 or 3 interviews. Sometimes for very small teams, up to 5 people, let's say, there could be just one interview and everybody is in the interview panel. But with bigger teams, I'd say there'd be an initial interview panel, and then you do get the chance to communicate with other team members at another time. So you'd be given contacts and you can reach out and ask questions if you have other questions that you don't want to necessarily ask in front of the hiring manager. Yeah, that's it.
That's a really nice idea. I like that.
Maybe
Yeah.
so for my I guess my discussion of this aspect is I've always been working at startups, so I've really been involved in those types of hiring processes, which I've experienced it being a lot more variable, so quite variable from company to company, and kind of depends on the stage that they're at. So, for example, my first role that I had after doing my startup, I got that job by networking. So it was a coffee chat that turned into, oh, well, we actually have we kind of need someone like you to come do something like that at our company. And that, led to 5.5 years at a U of T spin out. So that was one way to do it. And then in my current role, this one came about through an outbound strategy from the company. And so the company has an internal team that's looking for candidates that can fit into roles that they have. So they're reaching out to people, and that's how I learned about this particular role. But we also have an inbound strategy. So we're posting job opportunities on our webpage and also on LinkedIn. So for someone who's looking for a job, typically earlier on in your career, you're going to be doing the networking and the looking for opportunities online kind of approach. And then as you get further along in your career and you've developed some skill sets and some experience, then you'll have more recruiters reaching out to you. So there's different ways it can come about. But then once you have gotten an interview at Lumerate, for example, the process is sort of an introductory, just like a chat to get to know the candidate, and then you progress further along into more advanced rounds. One of those rounds or 2 of those rounds will be technical assessments. So it might be like a data challenge where we'll give you a spreadsheet with some data in it and then ask you a question. And you'll have to, solve it on a Zoom call in an hour. And, if you do well, you progress to later stage rounds. But all this to say, like it's quite variable. But for your stage, definitely be doing the coffee chats because you never know, you might happen upon an opportunity. And also keep an eye on LinkedIn and on the web pages of any company that you might be interested in working at.
Perfect. Thank you. And Hannah, real quick.
I think one of the things that Tyler said is really important, like try and go directly to the website to apply, because I've seen this happen at my place where the LinkedIn application wouldn't actually link to our HR portal. So all these people were applying and the thing wasn't actually going through. And we only knew because I knew one of the people applying. So we knew that their application hadn't gone through. So if you can, look on LinkedIn, but then go on the company's website and find the job advert there and apply directly so that there's no middleman where the application could get lost, because it does happen. And then for my specific role, it would be a phone screening with HR, a writing assessment. So usually would be given a brief of Docstar X and Y have developed this and this, and they want to get funding from a donor, kind of put together a brief proposal in that kind of language. Think about what might appeal to the donor, why they might want to give. if you're successful with this, it would be an interview with the manager as well as someone on the major gifts team who we closely work with. And then a second interview was kind of higher up. Definitely, as some of the other panelists have said, highlight your transferable skills. So what you've learned during your PhD, how it applies to the role. And because this is for lay communications, I was asked to, for example, almost give a 3MT thesis like presentation in my interview. So if you have those kind of things prepped, then if they're like, oh, how would you present your research to a donor? You're ready to go and you don't even have to think about it because you've already practiced these things and you just have your 3-minute thing ready to go.
Amazing. I think that was, especially the LinkedIn Direct website, that was a pretty helpful tip for everyone. So thank you all so much for your answers. Joanne, I'll pass it off to you to facilitate the next segment, which is the breakout rooms. Oh, I think you're on mute.
There we go. So I have all of the breakout rooms ready and set to go. I am going to post what I hope is very simple instructions, but I'm also here in the main room in case folks need support. So I'm going to open the breakout rooms. Everyone, all our panel members will have their own separate breakout rooms, and you will have the option of kind of moving in and out of the breakout rooms. There will be 2 rounds, so 15 minutes each, and we'll let you know when the 15 minutes are up. You're certainly welcome to stay in the room if you're having, a really like deep, robust conversation, but we want to offer the opportunity in case you had multiple folks you wanted to see today. So for our participants, you should be able to see how you would go about choosing a breakout room, and happy to assist with any sort of tech things. And I'm going to stop recording as well.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. I hope everyone got a engaging conversation. I know when I was trickling in through a couple of them, there were some great conversations happening. So thank you, panel members, once again for your time. And just to close off real quickly, almost rapid fire away, if we could go around, just give one last piece of advice that you would like to give to your students. Darren, why don't you take off?
Sure. So I actually gave this advice in the breakout room. So for those of you that heard it, double click on it, I guess. So I remember that when I was making my decision about my first job after grad school, it seemed like it was kind of like a life altering decision that would, majorly impact my future and like everything that came after, and that it would close so many doors, that I could never recover if I made the wrong decision. And I just want to say that, like, from my experience, that's not true at all. If you're super stressed out about making the right decision, I would just say, like, try and relax and realize that in a way there's not really a wrong answer, right? Like you're gonna make your best guess at your next role based on reflecting on yourself and what your own personal preferences and interests and skills are, and where you think you would be a good fit. And then you're going to take the jump, right? You're going to go try it. You're going to go, you're going to get into the role, and you're going to learn a lot about yourself and about what you like and what you don't like. And I just want to reaffirm for you that there is no right or wrong answer. You're just going to experiment and iterate along the way for your career. So you're going to do something, you're going to see how it goes, and then you're going to make a better decision the next time. And it's totally okay to deviate from what you think is the plan. So just relax. You got to make a decision, make it, and then learn from it and move on.
Thank you, Darren. I think that's very needed to hear. Gitanjali, do you want to go next?
I think I muted myself. All right, there we go. So I just wanted to say that, your career for all those PhDs out there does not have to be linear. Try and embrace change and explore. I once thought that I had a clear career path in mind, but some detours led to really fulfilling experiences. And so, take up those projects outside your field. Maybe it could be a leadership role or something entirely new. Take the chance. They do build skills, open many doors, like Darren was saying, and also foster growth. So be open to unexpected opportunities.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Hannah?
I think be kind to yourself. You know, I think we're so stressed about like, what am I going to do next? Like everyone asks you that question. And also, please remember to celebrate like achieving what you have, like finishing grad school. I think we're so focused on like, oh my God, I have to finish it. I got to figure out what to do with my job. I was the same. And then my fiance sat me down. He was like, can you please celebrate the fact that you just finished a PhD and like, you know, dwell on this for a bit before you go into the next panic mode. You just panicked about defending and finishing this PhD, and now you're going straight into panicking about this role. And I think I really needed to hear this. Was like, be kind to yourself. Like, you've done this huge thing, celebrate it, take some time for yourself. Nothing is going anywhere. I promise you. And like, no one worries about how old you are, how long it's taken you. Like, it's fine. Like, take the time that you need and then go and stress about finding a job.
Perfect. Thank you. And Tyler.
I said it at the beginning that I was going to steal it from Darren, and I'm going to keep harping on it. Have these conversations. The amount of people who during, the breakouts and stuff were like, that's great, that's fantastic, I'm writing this down. Like that was us talking for 5 minutes, right? You talk to so many other people, you're going to get so many more different perspectives, ones that might be more geared to careers that you're interested in. There's so much value just aside from, being able to reflect on what you can offer, but also just developing that network every time that you do that, keep it up because there's so much to gain from it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, all of the panel members, for your time and for such insightful advice and conversations. And thank you for everyone joining and attending. I will pass it back on to Joanne.
Just echoing thanks and gratitude into the space, and wanted to just do a round of virtual applause, or if folks can come on camera to give applause or do a waterfall on the chats. We have different options available to us, but just thank you so much to our panel members. And then I know the folks who will be listening to the recording after today will greatly benefit as well. So thank you all for your time, and just wishing you a good start to April, which is just around the corner for us. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, guys.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.